Believe it or not, we could spend a whole semester just learning about the different structures inside of your brain. So I have picked 9 for this learning outcome, and these are the parts of your hindbrain and your limbic system. It's really important to know what these structures are, which system they're a part of, and what their primary function is. You'll definitely want to work with those practice questions well and tell them apart. So the hindbrain is actually at the base of your brain, and it is very important. It contains a lot of really important structures, and that's why damage to this area can actually produce a lot of damage to your life, a lot of damage to your body. So if you play sports, you always want to protect that area very, very carefully. But let's talk about the structures in your hindbrain. There are 4. And the first is the medulla. If you remember a movie called The Waterboy, you have heard of this before. But the medulla is important because it controls your vital functions like swallowing, breathing, your heart rate. Very important, the medulla. We also have something called the pons. And the pons is responsible for sleep, dreaming, and arousal. I'll give you some tips to help you remember these. They're a little bit silly, but if it helps you, I don't care. But my mom used to always put Pond's cream on her face. It's an actual thing if you don't know what it is, but it's by Oil of Olay, I think. But Pond's facial cream she would just always have on her face before she'd go to sleep. So when I think Pons, I remember that lovely image, and then I think sleep. So the Pons, part of your hindbrain, responsible for sleep, dreaming, and arousal. You also have your reticular formation, and your RF, as we call it for short, is responsible to kind of selective attention, alertness. And then finally, you have your cerebellum, which actually means little brain. And your cerebellum is responsible for fine, kind of rapid motor movement. So those are the 4 parts of your hindbrain. Your limbic system is actually in the very center of your brain. It's very primitive. Your brain develops from the inside out, so these 5 structures actually are some of the very first parts to develop. And you'll see that they're always not the most enlightened or developed parts of the brain. So when we talk about your limbic system, let's start with your thalamus. Your thalamus is kind of like a switchboard operator. It relays all the information that comes in from your senses, and it figures out where it needs to go. When you look at a rose, your senses don't just activate separately. They all activate together. And your thalamus takes all that information, what you see, what you smell, what you touch, and it sends it to different parts of your brain. So very important, that thalamus. Your hypothalamus is responsible for all of your motivations, kind of your instinctual drives. Your hypothalamus is responsible for your urge to sleep, to eat, to drink, to have sex, all of those kind of basic human characteristics. So I think about hyperdrives when I see hypothalamus. It's an old Star Trek term. But again, hypothalamus, motivation, and kind of instinctual drives. Also in the limbic system, we have your hippocampus. Your hippocampus is responsible for the formation of long-term memory. I've always used a really ridiculous example to help my students remember this, and they say that it works, so I will keep using it, I suppose. But if you were to be on a school campus and look out the window and see a hippo, that would probably be something you would remember for a very long time. So that would be a long-term memory of that hippo on your campus. So hippocampus, long-term memory. You might be laughing at me now, but hopefully you'll remember that come test time. We also have the amygdala, which is responsible for fear. Another kind of Star Wars reference here, but I think about Princess Amidala, kind of a fearless person in the movie. So amygdala, just a helpful way for you to remember that that's the part of your limbic system that's responsible for fear. And then finally is the cingulate cortex. I don't have a cheesy way to help you remember that, but your cingulate cortex is responsible for cognitive and emotional processing. So know all 4 parts of the hindbrain and what they do, and then know all 5 parts of the limbic system and what they do. You don't have to use my cheesy little ways to remember if you've got your own, but whatever works is very helpful in learning a lot of these new terms.